Chapter 19. Another Debrief. Then we went to Baddock and Bloom, implanted each of their memories with a quick précis of what had happened, and left them to sleep it off, Ginny concluded, back at Grimold Place. Dennis and I took his antidote to the polyjuice and apparated back here. I hate to have to say it, but Dennis was brilliant. Thanks, Ginny, Dennis acknowledged wryly. You make me feel almost appreciated. Rather Stanley strange. Harry shook his head. We should never have let him out of Azkaban. Hermione shuffled uneasily in her seat. And Zabini was sceptical, you say? Ron asked. I didn't say, Dennis corrected him. That was what he said to us. I think it was an act. We thought Zabini, and maybe others, had been planted in the audience, Ginny explained, to check that Lestrange's speech had persuaded the audience and see if there were any dissenters. I can't believe that Torag said we were the generation that beat Voldemort, Ron growled. That scumbag was a Death Eater. No offence, Draco. You don't have to remind me I was one, Draco groaned. It's with me every day. Hermione, who was sitting between him and Lydia, laid a consoling hand on his arm. So, they want to unite the wizarding community to act against the leaders of the Muggles, then set the rest of the Muggles free, Harry summarised. While destroying the Statute of Secrecy and presumably putting them in charge of Muggles and magical people alike, Dennis added. Not so far from Grindelwald's ideas, Ron pointed out. Just skipping over the bits where millions get killed and the Muggles are enslaved. You can see the appeal, though, Hermione said. If you pretend there won't be war and enslavement, then getting rid of the effort to try and hide ourselves away will strike a chord with a lot of people. They have contrived a supremely palatable way of presenting their coup. Solve the biggest problems of the wizarding world, free the Muggles, save the planet, become benign leaders. The alternative being to let the Muggles use magic against them and risk being wiped out, like all the other species for which the Muggles have no use. The others looked round at Ambrose, who had spoken. He had been quiet until this point. I do beg your pardon, he said with a sheepish smile. I am speaking as though I am not a Muggle, when patently I am. It is simply that I've seen these tricks played in the Muggle world many a time. Big stick, big carrot. Irresistible if you lack critical thinking, as so many do. Ask a big question, push for the obvious answer, then people tend to forget that the question was never relevant. But all of this is missing the point, he concluded. Missing which point? Harry asked. We still have no idea who Aloria Rakison is, nor where we might find her, Ambrose replied. We need to get deeper into this movement, or whatever you want to call it, Ron said. That's going to have to be down to me, Dennis said in an airy voice. Dennis, I can't allow you to... Harry began. Oh, shut up, Potter. You're buried miles under Cumbria, Dennis joked. What are you going to do about it? What will you do, Dennis? Hermione asked. There's another meeting coming up next week, Dennis told her. Are we going as Baddock and Bloom again? Ginny asked. No, Dennis said with a note of finality in his voice. Ron is right. I need to get in deeper, and I'm afraid, Ginny, you don't know these people well enough. I'll have to go on my own. Who has? Harry asked. Renfield? Dennis shook his head. Renfield is an organiser. People will expect answers from him, and I don't know the answers. I'll go as someone who's on the inside, but more of a follower. I was thinking Zabini. The rest of those around the table stared at him. Some shifted uncomfortably. Harry twisted his coffee mug in his hands. Ambrose picked up another chocolate chip cookie. That's... Hermione said. It's a bit of a gamble, Dennis proffered. We're not sure he's on the inside, it's just a hunch I have. If I'm wrong, I'll have to try someone else, and we will have lost some time, that's all. But if I'm right, I think I'll be deep enough in to see who's actually involved. Then I can see if they know how to get to this Aloria. But we know Lestrange is deep into all this, Ron argued. We should go straight to him. We're not supposed to know how to get to him, Harry said. And now we don't. Hermione looked at him pointedly. We've been trying to keep tabs on some of those who were pardoned, Harry explained. Harry, Hermione snapped. For their own protection, Harry asserted. There might be people who would bear a grudge against them. Harry, you were expressly forbidden from harassing the Pardonese, Hermione scolded. Oh, come on, Hermione, said Ron. How were we supposed to know if they were obeying the terms of their release? That is the responsibility of magical law enforcement, Hermione said coldly. It was deliberately taken away from the Aurors because they had more grudges to bear than anyone else. Only the Aurors have the skills to know if they were behaving themselves, Harry explained in an even, if slightly strained voice. Those Death Eaters could run rings around the plods in enforcement, Hermione, you know that, Ron protested. Ronald, it's a matter of principle, she retorted, and it's a matter of law. Well, said Harry, you got what you wanted. We lost track of Rabastan and he's free to do whatever he likes. It wasn't what I wanted. The Ministry has to keep its word, or how will people ever know where they stand? Hermione persisted. We have a duty, Ron began. Be that as it may, Ambrose's voice cut across the blossoming argument. Dennis seems to have the right idea. If Mr. Zabini is intimately involved, and Mr. Lestrange is unavailable for questioning, then it would appear Dennis's suggestion is our best way forward. I'm hoping Lydia will be able to tell me it's all going to go well like last time, said Dennis. I don't know, she shrugged. I get these feelings sometimes. I don't think I can control them. I'm sure it'll all settle down, Ginny smiled. And school will help you to control it all. You'll be able to get a wand, Draco offered. The same as all your classmates. Wands are there to help you direct your abilities. Did you get these weird things, feelings? Lydia pleaded. Everyone has different experiences, Harry said. Yours may be different again, seeing you didn't grow into your powers. I found out I could talk to snakes. Charming, said Ambrose. Lydia groaned. Neville's uncle threw him out of a window to see if he would bounce, said Ron. I don't think it was deliberate, Ron, Hermione corrected. Though they did throw me off one of the piers at Blackpool. Colin made his bike fly, said Dennis. I made mine fly a couple of days later. Oh, Dad thought he was having a breakdown. He's a muggle. The tension broken, they all regaled Lydia with stories of their early signs of magic. Ambrose sat back and smiled at the way Lydia was drinking it all in. In the days leading up to the next meeting, Lydia wandered around the rooms of 12 Grimmauld Place. She could never settle in one place for any length of time. She tried to feel how well the meeting might go. She tried to see into the events of the meeting, tried to imagine Dennis returning to the kitchen with good news. She eventually even tried to imagine him coming back with bad news, or not coming back at all. But nothing happened. Nothing jumped to the front of her mind saying, "This is how it will be." Nothing. Ron and Harry had told her so much about growing up with their magic that they were repeating their stories more often than not. Lydia started to spend more of her time with her uncle, and sometimes with Draco. She asked the Hogwarts professor if his research had turned up anything which might help her. There were allusions, he told her, to the experiences of the first wizards and witches. Most of it was legend passed down by word of mouth, before being committed to writing. Some of it was merely the odd line in a poem or a song, little mentions which stood out once you were looking for them. Comparing the different accounts, the common threads were that the powers they had were unruly and hard to focus. Wands had been used by later generations to give more control, but by this time the powers had calmed down and weakened somewhat, at least according to legend. Later generations had developed the combinations of wand movements and words, which were the basis of high magic to this day. Lydia had asked if she could go to buy a wand, but of course they were in no position to venture out in public. Ambrose had suggested that she might use Granville's wand, which they had picked up at Throckley Mine. Harry believed that, as Lydia had not won the wand from Granville, it would not work well for her. Because of this, it would be an unsuitable wand for her as a beginner. She had to settle for waiting for the feelings, the unbidden knowledge to arrive of its own accord. Such things were not normal wand magic anyway, Draco had told her. For the last couple of days before the meeting, Lydia had stuck by her uncle. She took to reading books around the house as he did, though she chose different books. In the absence of any science or maths books, which would have been her preference, she selected the Tales of Beedle the Bard, and books about various magical creatures. She tried one or two of the many books about Quidditch, but it was terribly dry, reading about a sport she had never seen played. Ron came across her reading Newt Scamander's seminal work, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. He told her about their school friend, Luna Lovegood, who had married Rolf Scamander, Newt's grandson. Together they now roamed the world, carrying on Newt's legacy of finding and understanding magical creatures. Lydia told him that Harry had mentioned the couple before, though it seemed a long time ago now. Draco promised to introduce her to the couple, should the opportunity ever arise. The whole conversation cheered Lydia enormously. Sunday evening came around, the evening of the next meeting. Lydia started to feel gloomy again. Dennis came to visit them before he set off to take over Zabini's looks and his place at the meeting. Lydia racked her brains trying to come up with magically inspired advice, but still nothing was forthcoming. Her eyes and nose were beginning to sting with the threat of tears. At last, Dennis rose to leave. He looked to Lydia expectantly. "I'm sorry, Dennis," she blurted out. "I can't feel any sign of how it's going to turn out." She could feel her mouth quiver, and she blinked hard to tell the tears to stay where they were. Dennis crouched down beside her and held her hand. "Don't worry, Lydia," he smiled and shook his head. "I've managed without your help all my life, and I'm still here." As he stood again, she smiled weakly. "Be careful, though," she pleaded. "Ask Samantha Selwyn if there's any way you can help." Lydia's hands flew to her face. Dennis beamed at her. "I'll be sure to do that," he said, and skipped from the kitchen up to the hallway. A chorus of congratulations swept around the table. Uncle Ambrose laid a kindly hand on her shoulder. "You have to trust yourself to do what you can," he told her. "Simply be you. Your helpful nature will do the rest." "I think that's right, Lydia," Draco confirmed. "I suspect when you want to help, and the timing is right, that's when these insights come to you." "I think he's going to be all right," she said.